Okay, so now we're going to be doing the United States versus Lopez court case. So the participants were obviously the United States federal government and Lopez. So the background of this case, the United States Constitution has set up a system of government that knows that the federal government and the states have to share powers because we need to have a checks and balances situation going on. So the powers of the state and federal government are limited, and they are described explicitly in the Constitution. On this list, we have creating post offices, raising an army, coining money, declaring war, and regulating commerce among the states for the federal government. So leading to this case, many of the problems were created because Lopez argued the Congress had passed the law, the gun-free school zones, and it had exceeded the constitutional power of the federal government. So the plaintiff in this case was Lopez, and he said that the act was related to interstate commerce and that the Congress could not pass this type of law because it was not constitutional under the commerce law. And he also said that the different states need to be able to make the standards as to whether this act should be enacted, because states like California and a state in the South like Georgia is going to be way different in where their gun laws are. And the defendant in this case is the United States, and they said that the Constitution, as Congress, they had the authority to pass this act because they were Congress and they thought that they could do what they wanted. They didn't have to listen to the Constitution. And they said that, one side note that they said was, the United States also says that the guns near the schools would negatively impact students' learning, which is true, but again, they're violating the Commerce Clause, so they can't do that. So this case went to the Supreme Court because it was a federal issue. This was a federal gun-free zones act that they passed, and they were obviously going to get involved because they were the ones that passed the act in the first place. So they agreed to hear this because, again, it was a federal act and they were going to get involved anyways, so they had to make a case against Lopez because they wanted to keep their power. So the court ruled that Congress had exceeded its constitutional authority under the Commerce Clause because it was in the Constitution and they weren't allowed to do that. So the court decided this way because the United States overstepped their bounds and said the Constitution Commerce Clause, and it was clear in the Constitution that they couldn't do this, but they still did it. So the actual vote count in this court case was 5-4, 5 for Lopez. So for the dissenting opinion or concurring opinion, the Supreme Court ruled that the possession of firearms in proximity to schools did not fit into the definition of interstate commerce, and that's why they ruled it as unconstitutional. And the difference between concurring opinions and majority opinions, the majority opinion is the different opinions is where half of the justices have one opinion, and then the concurring opinion is the opposite and is authored by one or two of justices. For the case's significance, the significance of this case was that it was marked as the first time in half of a century since the last case of this time that that Congress was held accountable for overstepping the power under the Commerce Clause. And again, this impacted America because we were trying to preserve a system of federalism and delegated certain powers to the state and federal governments, so this affected us in that way. I agree that this case was fairly settled because it specifically notes in the Constitution that the federal government was overstepping their bounds under the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, thus it should be ruled unconstitutional.